Good morning. We're in mid-September and we're fishing a deep, clear lake in southern Wisconsin. Main game plan today was to target smallmouth bass. They're starting to set up on deeper breaks in the lake. What we have today is a pretty severe weather condition. We're on, I guess you could say, day 0 or day 1 cold front. The prior 4 days or so, we've had very hot, unusually warm weather for mid-September. Weather in the 90s, high 80s, warm, very warm, humid nights in the 70s. And then around 6 o'clock last night, all the way up until about an hour or so ago, we've had severe thunderstorms. There was tornado warnings throughout this area, and air temp today is going to be high as 70. So you know, one of the things that I always say is that I'm going to go fishing no matter what. If I can go fishing, I'm going to go fishing, because there's always something to learn. There's always things you can build upon, even under a difficult day. But again, my expectations are fairly low today. But a couple interesting things. First off, sometimes a day 0 or day 1 can still be a productive day. As you can tell, we have low light conditions. So oftentimes day 1 of a front can be a little bit better day than day 2. By day 2, post cold front, typically you have very high skies, bright blue skies, and a lot of wind. But sometimes day 1, the back end of the front is still moving through. So that's the situation we have today. So you never know. But there was so much rain last night. There was I saw severe flooding on my way here. So that rain, all that rain coming into the lake is, you know, probably affecting the water conditions as well. So what are, you know, say you are going to fish on a day 1 or a day 2, what are some of the things you can do? Well, the first thing is there are probably not going to be a lot of guys out fishing today. And so that offers me an opportunity to sharpen up some of my best spots in the lake by getting my markers out, reconfirming my sight lines. So that's one thing. You can do some really good mapping in poor conditions, because most of us don't like to do a lot of that when there are other fishermen around, especially getting markers out. It tends to draw a lot of attention. Second thing you can do is you can troll for stragglers, and you know, just put in a full day trolling, and maybe pick up a fish here and there. And again, when you're trolling, you're still always learning. So those are 2 of the things you can do, and I can say that part of my game plan today will be to really work over a couple areas that I already know really well in this lake, and probably use a few markers on them. So this lake is a multi-species lake. I'm here for the bass as usual. I love fishing for bass, and there's a good population of largemouth and smallmouth bass in this lake. And my original game plan, which is probably I'll probably stick to that game plan pretty closely today, was to fish for the smallmouth, because they're setting up on deeper breaks here. You know, this fall and going into winter, I'm going to be spending a majority of my time fishing for smallmouth on lakes, either this lake or lakes similar to it. So I'm really out here to just sharpen my skills fishing for those smallmouth deep. And so that's something I'm going to do today. I'm going to check much slower speeds than I typically do. So again, I'll be learning today in a number of different ways, using different tools that are a little bit slower than I would normally use, and taking extra time to map some of the areas that I like to fish to make sure I really get to know them. Once you really get to know a spot, nobody can take that away from you, you know, especially if you put it down on paper, take pictures of your sight lines and attach those to your drawings. I have a number of books on different lakes with spots, and so it offers you the ability to go back to a lake after 5 years or even 10 years or 20 years. And if you have it documented, those sight lines typically don't change, and the spots typically remain productive. Okay, we just got done checking the shallows, which I always like to do when I first get on the water. And what I've found is pretty severe water conditions, a lot of mud. I think it rained a lot more last night than I realized. So we have a pretty unstable day. So let's get back to how we can still be productive on a very, very difficult weather and water condition. So, first of all, this is a lake that is heavily pressured by fishermen, and I haven't seen another boat out here. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I like to do on a day like today is on spots that I know that have been productive for me in the past, spend a lot of time on those. And 99, so the next spot we're gonna fish, 99 out of 100 times I would not put a marker on it, just because it tends to draw a heck of a lot of attention. This spot is on a large point. There's a very small finger on one side of the point that is the most productive spot. On the point, I have caught multiple big smallmouth bass on that point over the years. So what we're gonna do this morning is we're gonna put a marker on that. And one of the main reasons we're gonna put a marker on that is because we are gonna fish it from multiple anchor positions, and we're gonna fish at multiple speeds. So typically on a regular weather condition and the fish seem to be going, I am not gonna be spending this amount of time on a spot like this. I'm gonna be moving around. I'm gonna be trying to cover a good amount of water on multiple productive areas. And I'm generally gonna be starting with fast speed. So what we're gonna do on this spot, we're gonna start with a blade. This is a 1/2 ounce blade. And this is typically a higher speed bait. Now you can slow a bait down. You can start with a heavy blade bait and really rip it. You can move to a lighter blade bait to slow down your speed. You can let it sit on the bottom for longer periods of time. You can lift it up instead of lifting it up a foot or two, you could lift it up 3 or 4 inches and then let it sit on the bottom for 20 seconds. That can be a productive way to slow down speed. So today we're gonna do a little bit of that with the blade, but I prefer to then move to slow down my speed, then move to something more like a tube, which I feel like I can be a little bit more productive with if I'm working this slower. So I'm still gonna be hopping it and dragging it, and I can still crack it a little bit like I might with a blade bait, really rip it a little bit. But this would be my second slower speed today on this particular spot. And then I'm going to move to a real finesse presentation. Very small, this is a 1/4 ounce jig with a very small plastic on it. And I'm gonna work the area over extremely slow. And so on a difficult weather condition like today, another thing that I like to do is push myself outside my comfort zone. So today we're going to add a 4th speed control. We're going to throw a spy bait or a spin bait. This is a really, really slow presentation. It's going to take a long time to get down to the bottom, and it's going to work very, very slowly. So I typically would not use a presentation like this, and often wouldn't even get as far as the finesse presentation. But we have a difficult weather condition. So number one This day offers us the ability to use our markers on spots and get to know our spots better. Number two, it offers us the ability to just slow down and try a lot of different speeds. And number three, these are the kind of days where you can do things that you normally wouldn't do to push yourself outside your comfort zone. When a day when the fish are really going and I have the potential to catch a lot of bass and each spot's offering up a few fish and sometimes a bunch of fish, I'm not going to move outside my comfort zone. I'm going to make sure I use the tools that I have that I'm used to catch those fish. But I don't expect that kind of day today. So let's go outside our comfort zone and maybe expand some of the tools we use and still make this a productive day. So we couldn't put our marker out because there are two fishermen within eyesight of us, but we're still going to fish the spot. We just went through the blade bait. We only made about 5 casts, and now we're moving on to the tube. Remember to always count your lures down, especially on a spot like this. So I'm fishing a very steep, the break line's at about 25 feet, and it's very, very steep. So I'm fishing parallel to the break line from this anchor position. So I'm coming over the spot, but the lure's also staying in position along the break line. And so one cast a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, I might be too shallow or too deep, but make your casts, count them down, actually pick a site on the opposite shoreline where your lure lands, and when you get the right countdown, that's the spot. It's also important to always be picking a spot on the shoreline when you make a cast, just in case you catch a fish. You want to make sure you cast right back to the same spot. So anyway, we're moving on to the tube now. Strong. All right, our first smallmouth of the day. Extremely slow speed control and also a much smaller profile lure. And we have our first fish after casting to that spot multiple times with both the blade bait and the tube. Our first cast with the turd, the 1/4 ounce, produced a fish. So, one small fish doesn't necessarily tell us everything we need to know, but going through the process of speed control, which can often be fairly painful. I mean, we started out with an 8 count. We're fishing in 25 feet of water. We started out with an 8 count on the blade bait. up to an 11 count with the tube. We're at a 9 count with this little lure, but we have to fish it really slow. And so this can be a painfully boring process. You really, when you're going through an exercise like this, you really want to make sure you're on a spot that you know produces fish. But anyway, the advantage of going through this process is that if we get confirmation on this speed control on a couple other spots, then we have probably dialed in for the day, and we don't have to go through the exercise of all the speed controls throughout the day. I mean, sometimes it's important to speed up and slow down throughout the day, but on a tough day like this, once we kind of figure out something that works, I'm probably going to stick with it. Another smallmouth, not a big one, but second cast, second fish. So we're starting to dial in on what we need to do today to make a catch. Boy, this guy's really beat up. Wait till you see this guy. Look at those marks that he has on him from probably muskie. He's introduced muskie into this lake a few years ago. He got away. So that's now 2 casts in a row on this bait. I am not going to go back to the tube or the blade today as search baits. I'm going to use this speed, or if I have to go to the spy bait that I showed you before, or a drop shot, similar very slow speeds, I may do that. But we're starting to narrow in, so going through this process can really open our eyes up to how much speed can make a difference in your ability to make a catch on a tough day. There we go, another fish. Third cast, third fish. Oh, better fish. Whoa. Well, I guess I should have checked my line after those first 2. We just broke him off. Obviously, my line was frayed from the rocks, and it's a very nice fish. It's unfortunate. Obviously, very disappointed by that. But we talk about why you go fishing on a day like today. First of all, we've caught 2 and lost a really nice one at the boat. So we're actually catching a couple fish. We're learning a bunch. And, you know, one of the things we just learned is, you know, we're going to be doing a lot of this type of fishing this fall on these rocky structures that oftentimes have a lot of zebra mussels, and we're probably going to be using really light line and finesse presentation. And that's just a good lesson to me that I need to be checking my line a lot more often as we get into the fall and winter, as I work these areas. So that doesn't happen. So it's already been a very productive day. Jeez. Whoopsie. Okay, right on the brake line, another small guy. Okay, it's been real slow, and there's more storms coming now. It looks like there's they're pretty heavy, probably some lightning involved. So that's a wrap for the day, and we'll be back out here soon.